Inspired by Dawn Wall. So there's a sound in Dawn Wall's Rain God that I really like, and it's just tucked away in the background. There's not really a lot to it, and it only happens a few times throughout the tune. It's kind of a turnaround sound at the end of each bar. And here's what it sounds like. So that bass growl tucked away in the low end, I really like that, and I'm going to make something like it. So this is inspired by Dawn Wall. Okay, so here we are in Ableton, and this is the original again. So that whoa, whoa, whoa. I really like that. So it's kind of a Reese Neuro-y thing that sits in the background, and it just gives you a little lift, like something's coming and like the track is going to change just after this. So generally I'll create a sound like that by making really rich Reese sound with a lot of harmonic content, and then really aggressively filtering it with low passes and notches, band passes, and then OTTing it to bring back all of the top end that we've taken away. You get some really rich, interesting movement in the top end, which you can't seem to get any other way. It almost sounds distorted, but it isn't necessarily distorted, but you can do that as well. So I'll play you the original and mine back to back. And with my recreation, I've added a few seconds of the original track over the top, just so there's that same amount of masking going on. So you can kind of compare them fairly, because the strings and all the rest of the movement in the track really do mask what's happening in the low end. First the original and then my one. So it's close. It's not perfect, but it's close. You can see there's some automation lanes. I'm not going to cover those straight away. We'll come back to those after we've gone through the basics of the sound. So here in Serum, we can see we're using both oscillators and a filter and a whole bunch of effects. So we'll get rid of the effects for now. And we'll turn off the filter and we'll get rid of oscillator B. So we just have oscillator A, and it sounds like this. So it's just a unison saw. There's no other tricks on there. The detune's pulled down a little bit from default, and that's pretty much it. In this case, I'm using 6 voices. I would have just set that randomly. There's no real, you can go higher, go lower, and to me it sounds pleasant somewhere around there. Okay, so oscillator B is a triangle, and it is just beefing up the sound a bit. So it's just adding a little bit of bottom end. So the bandpass here is really crucial to the basic movement of the sound. So you can see we've got oscillator A and oscillator B going into the bandpass. It's a 24 dB bandpass. There's a little bit of resonance, a whole lot of drive, and the cutoff modulates based on the automation in Ableton. So you can see the modulation goes up and comes down, holds a little bit, and then goes up and then comes down and then goes up. So you can look at the automation and see that it follows the same movement as the bandpass. All right, the reason I've chosen that shape for the bandpass automation, which is this bottom row, is that when I was looking at the original audio, I can see that there's a lot of high frequency content, and then there's some slightly lower frequency content, and then we've got a nice bass pulse here, and then that ends, and we go through the mids and into the top end again. Then we sweep through the mids and we got a little bit of a bass pulse, and then we go up again. So I was trying to copy essentially what I could see in the waveform as the movement of the sound. So you can kind of see it goes up, comes down a little, comes down right into the bass region, comes up a little, goes all the way up, and then comes down, sweeps back down into the bass segment, and then comes out again. So I was copying that basic movement inside my automation envelope just to get me in the ballpark for the sound. So we've already got the bones of the sound together. Now it's about adding effects to enhance that. So we'll step through them one by one. I've got some tube distortion. So without and with. And we've got some reverb. Then I've got a filter, which is a low pass 6 dB filter, set quite low with a little bit of automation. So the automation on the low pass filter is really just done by ear. I listened to the bass sound and kind of tried to judge how much top end was in the sound at any point in time. So it felt like it mirrored a fairly similar movement to the bandpass movement. So I just kind of doubled that up a bit. So without the filter and with the filter. So we lose quite a lot of top end there. Then we use an OTT compressor to bring that back. And so the OTT compressor really sucks up the effect of the distortion and the reverb and makes them much more present. So I've turned off the effects before the OTT compressor and have a listen to the sound. And I'll turn those effects back on. So it's a bit throatier and a bit grittier with the effects before the OTT compressor. I generally find using subtle amounts of modulation effects before an OTT compressor gives you extra artifacts and extra like character to the sound that you can't really get by adding effects after the OTT, because the OTT is going to make anything in any frequency range more present. Adding tiny bits of effects before an OTT can really give you some interesting character. And on the OTT compressor, I moved some of these bands around just to get the right character that I wanted. So I really sucked out some of the mids. If we try manipulating that now, so that's got more mids. It's got less mids. And obviously you can do the same with the top end. So you can modify the sound with the multiband compressor just a taste. So we've also got a phaser here. So with this phaser, I've set it to be a static phaser by turning the rate to 0. And then I've just moved the depth and frequency knobs until I've got a sound that I like. You can use a static phaser to enhance or detract from certain frequencies in the frequency range, and you just do it by ear. Let's sweep through this a little bit and find something interesting. So I'm generally a fan of using negative feedback on this. With positive feedback, you tend to get that ringing, which I'm not really a big fan of. Whereas negative feedback will suck some of the frequency range out. So once I've found a nice static phasing setting, I'll bring the mix level down so that it's just a component of the sound. And I like how that sounds. And then I've got this EQ at the end, which is just polishing the sound off. So I noticed it still had too much top end compared to the original, probably because of an OTT compressor. I've got a high cut here, and I've just set the frequency range by ear. And it also had too much bass, so I've sucked out some of that just by decreasing the gain on a low shelf. Now, because we've taken away so much of the sound now, we can probably bring the levels up a little. There we go. So that's our little Neuro one-shot inspired by Don Wall. Okay, so I've put together a little section of a tune using this bass patch, and I'll play it as the outro. So this has been inspired by Don Wall.